All right, everybody, welcome to another deep dive. You ready to get into it?
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited for this one.
So today we are looking at the landscape of Canadian politics as we head into the new year. Specifically, we're going to be looking at what Canadians are thinking.
Okay.
And to do that, you sent over some recent polling data from the Angus Reid Institute. It's from December 2023.
Right.
This is fresh stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see where things are at.
Yeah, these numbers are super interesting. So let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
So the first big thing that stood out to me, and probably to a lot of people, is that Liberal support is at a record low,
Yeah.
16%
Wow.
among decided and leaning voters.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who maybe don't follow polling super closely, decided and leaning just means people who have either made up their minds or are strongly considering a particular party.
Right.
So really we're talking about like likely voters.
Yep.
And this 16% figure, this is the lowest the Angus Reid Institute has ever recorded. And their records go back to 2014.
Wow. So almost 10 years.
Yeah. So to put this in perspective, this rivals the low support that we saw before the 2011 election,
Mm-hmm.
which was a total wipeout for the Liberals.
Right. They lost a ton of seats.
Yeah, they went from, I think it was like 70-something seats down to 30-something.
Yeah, that's right. It was a huge loss for them.
And, I mean, the implications of this kind of low support are huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Liberals are in a really vulnerable position right now.
For sure.
It's going to be difficult for them to pass legislation, even without facing a non-confidence vote,
Right.
which is essentially just Parliament saying, we don't trust this government.
Exactly. It's a pretty big deal.
So it's going to require them to really work with other parties.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that could be a good thing. Potentially it leads to more cooperation to get things done.
Right.
But it could also just lead to a ton of gridlock.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility.
So it's kind of up in the air how that's going to play out.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
So it makes you wonder, where are all these Liberal voters going?
Right. Where are they ending up?
Right. So only 41% of those who voted Liberal in 2021 say they'll do so again.
Okay.
So 20% are leaning NDP, 16% conservative, and another 12% are undecided.
Wow. So a lot of movement there.
Yeah, it's like a total exodus from the Liberal Party.
It really makes you wonder what's driving that shift.
Yeah.
Like, are people just disillusioned with the Liberals, or are they finding these other platforms genuinely more appealing?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question, right?
For sure.
So while the Liberals are kind of sinking, the Conservatives are actually doing quite well. They're sitting at 45% support.
Okay.
Is this the beginning of some kind of like a major realignment in Canadian politics?
That's an interesting question.
A move away from this like traditional liberal dominance that we've seen?
It's definitely a possibility. You know, we've seen these sorts of shifts before in Canadian history,
Right.
but it's still too early to say for sure.
Yeah.
We need to see how these trends play out over time.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
definitely something to keep an eye on.
Okay, so let's not forget the NDP, though.
Right.
They're sitting at 21%,
Yeah.
which is actually their highest support in years.
Yeah, it is.
And they're calling for Trudeau's resignation,
Okay.
but they haven't actually moved to bring down the government.
Interesting.
It's just kind of a fascinating political calculation.
Yeah. What do you think their strategy is there?
I mean, I'm not really sure. It seems risky to me. Why would they risk letting the Conservatives gain even more ground?
Right.
Wouldn't it make more sense for them to make a bolder move now? Like, potentially that could pay off more for them in the long run?
Yeah, it's a tough call. I mean, on the one hand, they might be thinking that they can benefit more from letting the Liberals weaken further.
Right.
You know, just let them kind of keep sinking in the polls.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's a gamble.
Right.
Because if an election is triggered, are they really ready? And how are voters going to respond to this kind of wait-and-see approach?
Right, because it could backfire. So speaking of Trudeau, his approval rating is not looking good.
Yeah.
74% disapproval.
Oof.
How much pressure do you think this is going to put on the Liberal Party?
I mean, a lot of pressure. You know, a prime minister's popularity that can make or break a party's chances.
Right.
And with this level of disapproval, it wouldn't be surprising to see some calls from within the party for Trudeau to step down.
Yeah.
Especially if they start to really fear losing their grip on power.
So it's not just Trudeau. We've got to look at the other leaders, too.
Right. What about Poilievre and Singh?
Yeah, so Poilievre has a 55% disapproval rating,
Okay.
which is high,
Yeah,
but it's actually lower than Trudeau's.
that's true.
And then Jagmeet Singh, he's at a whopping 58% disapproval.
Wow.
That's an all-time high for him.
Really?
So what do you think this tells us about how the public views these other leaders?
Well, I think it paints a pretty complex picture. On the one hand, there's clearly a lot of dissatisfaction with the current government, but at the same time, there's also some uncertainty about the opposition. Like, are they seen as viable replacements? Poilievre's lower disapproval rating compared to other conservative leaders in recent years.
Okay.
That suggests he might be gaining some traction. But there's still work to do for both him and Singh if they want to convince Canadians that they're the right choice.
Right.
They need to articulate a clear vision.
Yep.
And connect with voters on a personal level.
Now, it's not all just about national trends, though.
Right.
We're also seeing some interesting regional variations.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So conservative support has actually surged in British Columbia,
Interesting.
which isn't typically considered a conservative stronghold.
Not really, no?
So what do you make of that?
Well, I think these regional variations are really insightful. They reflect, these local concerns
Right.
and how those concerns align with different party platforms. So I think it's really worth digging into what's happening in BC, because it could be a sign of things to come on a national level.
Okay, so to kind of recap, we've got the Liberals struggling, we've got the Conservatives gaining ground, and we've got the NDP kind of playing this cautious game. What does this all mean for the future of Canadian politics?
Big question.
Like, given all these trends,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think is the most likely scenario that's going to play out in the coming year?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, will we see a new government? Will we see a minority situation, which would require some delicate alliances or maybe even a surprise coalition? I mean, this political landscape is more dynamic than it's been in years, and the coming months are going to be crucial to watch.
All right, so we've got a lot to think about.
We do.
Thanks for diving deep into this with us today.
My pleasure.
To all of you listening out there, keep those brains buzzing.
Mm-hmm.
And stay tuned, because the political drama in Canada is just getting started.
It certainly is.